I am pleased to speak in the Waste Reduction and Recycling and Other Legislation Amendment Bill 2023. The issue of achieving better outcomes requires leadership. It requires strategies that can be implemented, and it needs targets that are clearly transparent and aren't changed simply because the government has no strategy and no competency to achieve those outcomes. If we're truly to see better environmental outcomes, then there has to be a better way than what we've seen, which is this government changing the targets, hiding reports and massaging the truth, which basically means they're less than honest about the outcomes. I take that interjection, recycling ministers, and not necessarily seeing better outcomes from what we've seen this morning, the same talking points in the hands of a different minister, the same excuses and the same lack of care for the outcomes of their actions. I don't think they intend to do harm, but the ethics of not intending to do harm and still doing harm are the same thing. This government is out of touch with how it drives good outcomes rather than just very nice talking points about their intentions. I want to refer to a matter that's already been referenced by my colleague, the Shadow Minister for Environment and Member for Bonnie, about the targets that this government set about diversion of waste, 55% by 2025. That was in their 2019 strategy. And yet what's happened in 2023, they've gone backwards. And we do want to put this under the spotlight because once again we hear the government getting up, nice talking points, everything's hearts and flowers and warm fuzzies and puppy dogs, but they're actually failing in the key areas of target delivery. And we have to call it out because there is a need to drive strategy and hold accountability with good outcomes. As my colleagues have been mentioning, it also requires consultation with those who've got the ability to deliver it, consultation and effective scrutiny of the best ways to achieve this, and you must work with industry. You also need to work with local government. And this amendment that the government are putting forward sounds awfully like muzzling and gagging local government with an amendment that seeks to so-called tighten up on misinformation. It sounds more like a government that is quite precious about how it allows people to speak. And I think that when we've seen the way that they've mishandled complaints against local government and the fact that you've got local governments tied up in all the red tape of people being able to complain about them, this government is now only providing another mechanism to bind the hands of local government with vague and, I think, not ingenuous attempts to address misinformation and more about gagging them from speaking out. Good information does need to go into the public arena, but this government is certainly not the gold standard. In fact, they're the lead standard in regard to information. They tend to hide things and then change definitions and not consult with those who are most impacted. The fact that they haven't got a consultation process that's seen this very amendment accepted and the fact they've been unable to explain it adequately, to me, is a red rag. It is, in fact, a warning system, a warning sign of what their real intentions are and the fact that there's going to be consequences that are adverse to good discussion and debate in the public arena. I want to address an issue which I know is due to be implemented with a deadline in September of this year, and that is microbeads, microplastics. And I accept that in the plan the ban on microbeads is due to come into effect in September of this year. And I welcome that and want to highlight this. I know people may still have cupboards of products that they have and don't even have any awareness of what these microplastics are, or that they've been in cosmetics and cleaning products for some time. I understand New South Wales has already banned microbeads or microplastics, and this ban is due to come into effect in Queensland in a few months' time. But it really is quite insidious just how many plastics are within so many areas of products, and this is one of those where people may have a cosmetic or may have a cleaning product and not even be aware, and you really have to strain the eyesight in order to read the ingredient list to even see what these products are and understand what they are. So that is a positive step forward. But I would say that we do need to have more education about the whole of life impact, not just of these products, but many other products that have a detrimental impact upon our environment, but also a detrimental impact potentially upon human well-being. And there are studies that certainly have demonstrated that microplastics and other types of plastics that are micro have ended up with tragic consequences in the marine system. But there are also growing bodies of evidence about them ending up ingested by human beings. And we still do not know the full impact of some of these plastics, microplastics, upon human well-being. There is research that has alluded to endocrine disruptors. There are research that's alluded to the impact of almost a type of estrogen that can impact upon human health. But let that research be presented. The main thing I want to highlight today is education is key for people to have awareness about the choices that we can make, but there is a need for legislation to drive change where sometimes the system only of personal choice is not enough to drive the outcomes, particularly in supply chains when people may not know what's in the product, may not have a way to avoid that because of the type of products that are being put out there. It's also been mentioned about the need to start looking more intently about whole-of-life systems for some increasingly popular products out there, and it's been mentioned about solar panels. That's been part of our lives for quite some time, and not only in the packaging, but the lack of recycling that is available in this country for solar panels. And most of us would have had solar panels on our roofs or in our communities for decades, but there is no ability to have these recycled, and you only need a hailstorm in a community to see an awful lot of these damaged before their so-called end of life. But this is something that we need to raise. There have to be more systems in place, and that requires leadership from government, working with industry in consultation to drive the best outcomes. It has also been mentioned about wind turbines, and that might be quite a few years down the track. But I know that there are parts of Queensland that have seen when there's been approvals for major mass solar farms, there hasn't been a whole-of-life approach, the way that you would expect, say, with a mine for rehabilitation and dealing with these products when they reach the end of their life. And I believe that that is something that does need the leadership and attention of government so that it isn't kicked down the road and then becomes a bigger problem to deal with. So I certainly support moves in regard to the circular economy, but I want to say sometimes we have to pay credit to earlier generations who didn't have a lot of money, they had different consumption patterns, and consequently they wasted very little. And there are generations of older Australians who didn't waste energy, and it's a lot more expensive today, who didn't waste their consumables because they didn't have a lot of them, and they certainly didn't have the wrapping that was around food that we have today. So maybe we have to learn from some of these previous generations about what it is to think about avoiding the extraneous wrapping that there is around household products, to look for ways that we better address household wastes in our own homes. And food waste may not be part of this bill, but certainly they knew how to drive economic values, and we need to give them the credit that a circular economy is being done perhaps in different ways by previous generations. We can learn from them.
Thank you.